The BRICS alliance, which consists of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is meeting in August in South Africa. And very high on the agenda is the creation of a new joint BRICS currency. Now, reportedly, the currency will be backed by commodities like gold, oil, and rare earths. And this idea is garnering much interest, with 20 nations applying to join the BRICS, including Saudi Arabia. And this all comes at a time as the trend to de-dollarize is accelerating. In 2001, 73% of global reserves were in dollars. That is now down to 58%. Meanwhile, several countries are formalizing bilateral trade agreements not using the dollar. China and Brazil, South America's biggest economy, have reached a deal to trade in their own currencies, ditching the US dollar as an intermediary. Argentina is paying for Chinese imports in yuan. India and Malaysia now use the rupee to settle trade. India has been buying oil in rubles, rupees, and dirham, and these are just some recent examples of the trend to trade not using the greenback. And the trend has hastened since Russia's invasion of Ukraine last year, with what many have called the weaponization of the dollar, including banning Moscow from the international SWIFT system. Well, my next guest sees this de-dollarization trend continuing and accelerating. He sees the war escalating significantly over the coming months, ultimately culminating in a global depression by 2025, creating the perfect opportunity for the new BRICS currency. Simon Hunt is the founder of Simon Hunt Strategic Services, which provides geopolitical and financial consulting. He has over 50 years of experience in commodities and finance and currently serves on the board of directors of Great Eastern Gold. Simon, it is great to have you with us. Welcome to Kitco.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure. And as we just discussed, it's very early in the morning where you are, so we certainly appreciate you taking the time. And Simon, we want to start off by really unpacking this whole idea of the BRICS currency. Now, the term BRIC was coined by Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill back in 2001 to describe the rise of Brazil, Russia, India, and China. They had their first summit in 2009 in Russia, and then South Africa joined in 2010, making it BRICS. Now they account for more than 40% of the world's population and about 26% of the global economy, and at least 20 other countries want to join in. How seriously, Simon, should we be taking this idea of theirs to launch a new currency?
I think it's a very serious attack on the dollar world that has existed since World War II. What has created this new growing organization is frustration with the way that America has used the dollar for its own purposes. And what BRICS is really all about is the development of a multipolar world. Instead of the world being dominated essentially by one country. And it's that growing frustration that is leading to so many other countries wanting to join BRICS Plus. How the new currency will evolve is obviously a pretty closely guarded secret between the Sherpas of the BRICS Plus, who are organizing the meeting in the end of 22nd to 24th of August. I think that there will be a lot of discussion. I think a roadmap has been planned. How much will be announced at the BRICS meeting is questionable. It clearly requires an awful lot of work to see that whatever is the new currency, how it will work. So we will probably see hints of what they are going to do. Now, the original idea was to link the currency to a basket of commodities that BRICS produces. I think that has evolved into whatever is the currency will be convertible into gold. Now, it can either either be using the renminbi to be convertible, which actually it is now. You can receive renminbi and you can convert the renminbi into gold through the Shanghai Gold Exchange, which since its inception has actually had a total of something like 25,000 tons moved through the exchange. An interesting aspect of this is how Russia and China treat their growing trade between the two countries. For instance, Russia is currently having a trade surplus of $23 billion odd. Those dollars are held in a gold convertible account in China's central bank, the PBOC. I suspect, without knowing, that that will be the template between China and the Gulf countries. What is also happening, as you mentioned, is that BRICS is using local currencies to settle trade balances. And that's being done through the BRICS bank, which is called the New Trade Bank. And they are building a reserve of local currencies, BRICS currencies. For instance, quite recently, they issued in the China bond market $1.2 trillion worth of panda bonds. So you can see that there's a very strong chosen path by BRICS to develop a new mechanism which will be against G7 countries. What people don't appreciate is the depth that BRICS has created in its secretariat. They have special secretariats for every single part of the world, whether it be geopolitics, whether trade, finance, education, and even sports. Each one has its separate secretariat, which is actually housed in the BRICS Tower in Pudong in Shanghai. So this is really the early developments of a new bloc of countries that really is a danger to the G7.
All right, Simon, a lot to unpack there, but I have to start off by focusing on the point where you said that you expect this currency to be convertible into gold. Is that to say that when this currency is launched, whoever holds it can take that and redeem it for physical gold? Is that what you mean by convertible, or is it just an idea that this will be backed by gold, but not necessarily redeemable?
I think eventually, I suspect, because I don't know, it will be a step-by-step approach. I think at the end of the, say, in the mid-2020s, which is only a few years away, it will be convertible into gold. And what people don't...
I mean, we're in 2023.
I know. Mid to late 2020s, this will happen.
Like,
okay. What people don't appreciate, or some don't, is the size of the gold reserves which China has and Russia has. China has in total 50,000 tons plus, and Russia probably north of 12,000 tons. So their central banks are only holding a small part of the total. As I mentioned earlier, since the inception of the Shanghai Gold Exchange, something like 25,000 tons has passed through the exchange into Chinese households and institutions. The remaining 25,000 tons, most of that is held by different ministries, including the PLA.
So you're suggesting a full-on return to the gold standard, perhaps even more acutely than it was before, if you expect this currency to be convertible into gold. I'm assuming not on a one-to-one basis, clearly.
I think that's what we will eventually see.
A full-on return to the gold standard.
I think that will probably happen before 2030 by countries who are now and will be members of BRICS Plus.
So to be clear, if somebody holds this new BRICS currency, they can go and exchange it for gold from the countries issuing it? Not
eventually, yes. As I said, I think it'll be a step-by-step approach.
Do you see other commodities being involved here? Because reportedly, the thinking has been that this would be a currency backed by a basket of commodities representing the natural resources of the various members, for example, oil or rare earths.
That was the original idea, but I think it's now evolved into being a gold-backed currency.
Well, what would that mean for the ability of these countries to issue currencies? I mean, that would seriously curtail that ability.
No. Well, that's a very good question, and it's a complicated answer. The first thing to note is that the Russian economist who is heading up the team to develop this new currency, in an interview he gave the end of last year to a Moscow-based newspaper, laid out a very important point. Whether it's pursued or not, I don't know, but he made the point that any existing member or new member who defaults on loans to Western banks and financial institutions will not be debarred from joining BRICS. So that is a very, very important point if they pursue it.
That would mean that all the debt that these countries owe the IMF, the US, the World Bank essentially gets wiped out when they launch this currency, is what you're saying.
So that's the first point. The second point is the BRICS Bank will eventually grow into being the BRICS World Bank. So a country like Zambia needs loans to continue to develop its mining industry. That's where they will go, not to a World Bank or Western banks.
Okay. How quickly do you see the membership expanding? Because we do know that around 20 countries are applying to join. Ethiopia making its application just today, I believe. Not that that's a significant economic player, but yet another one wanting to join the BRICS coalition. As it stands at the moment, it's still Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Saudi Arabia most likely to be the next that would be included, from my understanding. How quickly do you see this coalition expanding?
First of all, you have to remember that it requires the unanimous approval of all BRICS members to accept a new member. So I suspect that the first round of new members will be completed within a couple of years.
And who's most likely, which countries are most likely to be in that first round of expansion?
The Gulf countries. Don't forget that in December last year, President Xi gave a very important presentation to Gulf leaders. So I'm paraphrasing what he said. You will have surpluses with us. We will have deficits with you. We will have surpluses with you, and you will have deficits. How we resolve those differences will be through an interstate means. The message is laid out very clearly. He also said, we will be invoicing everything in RMB. So that also implies either you will hold your RMBs in our bond market, or you will have the means to convert that into go.
But the new currency is not going to be RMB, renminbis, or yuan. I am assuming it will be some neutral currency.
That's still an open question.
Right. And I understand it's purely, well, mostly speculation in terms of the details, because none of this has been made official in terms of the mechanisms, the details, just putting together the bits of data that we have from reports. What is official is that they are looking at launching a currency. That much we know.
Correct.
Yeah.
And she made that very clear to the Gulf leaders, and the Gulf leaders accepted it. Don't forget that both Saudi Arabia and the UAE have sold parcels of oil and UAE parcels of gas to China, received RMB, and then used, so one is told, used the Shanghai Gold Exchange to convert the RMB into gold. So one suspects these were just test parcels.
And do you see all of these countries adopting this currency as their domestic currency, or just using it to facilitate global trade?
Good question. Again, I suspect it's a step-by-step approach. That the first step is to use it to financing trade between each other. What it also means is that so much of the energy market is going to no longer be in dollars, but in other currencies. Why should central banks hold dollars? So any country that's part of BRICS, they don't need to hold dollars. Other central banks will look around and say, how much of our reserves should we hold in dollars? It won't be the same percentage. Then we have to look at, and what's a very important point, is how is America going to react to all of this? And that actually, you can link that into what's going on in Ukraine.
Before we get there, Simon, I just want to elaborate more on the idea of oil being priced in another currency, because just a reminder to our viewers is that part of what keeps the dollar as the global reserve currency is its status as the petrodollar, the way that oil is denominated using dollars. Most oil transactions worldwide are conducted in dollars, and this dates back to a pact signed between US President Nixon and Saudi King Faisal back in 1974. So how integral is the sale of energy in non-dollar to the unraveling of the dollar and to the prominence of this potential BRICS currency?
Well, essentially it becomes a petro-renminbi transaction.
Provided that the renminbi is the currency that is used, and backed by gold, because you said that you weren't clear on what the currency would be ultimately here.
Yeah, a large part. I mean, I've forgotten what percentage of the Gulf's oil goes to China, but that percentage will be in renminbi, as President Xi has actually said to Gulf leaders. The others will be in their own currencies. It won't be a dollar-based one. The only dollars, I mean, we don't know yet what the Gulf leaders, what currency they will use to sell oil to Europe. Will it be the euro? I don't know, but it won't be dollars.
But again, this is the intermediate step, you say, before the currency, the BRICS currency proper, is launched in whatever form that may ultimately take. That this is just part of the steps to get there.
Correct. It's a very planned approach. A lot of thinking has been done by the different secretariats in Pudong. And then you have the Sherpas. There was a very interesting interview the other day on 𝗣𝗿𝗶𝗺, the think tank in Russia, by their Sherpa to the BRICS meeting. Basically what he was saying, this is a planned development. We're going to be very cautious in how we launch it. We may not meet people's expectations at the forthcoming August meeting, but it's a planned approach. So what he's basically saying is, don't expect us to announce in August a 𝗼𝗿𝗶𝗺 currency, but it's coming. Whereas there have been some other reports that there will be an announcement of the 𝗼𝗿𝗶𝗺 currency.
Well, we do know that in the background, central banks have been hoarding up gold reserves, with the central bank purchases hitting record levels recently. Before we get into the US reaction, which is obviously a very, very big part here, I want to discuss the likelihood of unity amongst these countries, because already there's tensions between some existing members. China and India have border disputes, for example. When you have all of these countries together, surely there's going to be jostling for supremacy, jostling for who gets to take the lead. Is that assumed to go to China? Is that technically agreed upon? And what about, as I just touched on, the tensions that are already there amongst these countries? I mean, is it going to be like a kumbaya moment where, for the greater good of what they deem to be the greater good, they put differences aside? How do you see those dynamics playing out?
Of course, we don't know what's taking place through the back channels. We don't know whether China and India are quietly mending their fences. I suspect they are. There is what they are seeking is the greater good. And BRICS operates in a unanimous vote. So it is the creation of a multilateral world, which is probably why we are going to see this evolving in a step-by-step approach.
Right. A bifurcation of the global monetary system is what you're forecasting, as has been the forecast of other guests on our show who have concurred that gold will play a major role in this new currency. Again, before we get to the US reaction, which is of course pivotal here, I want to touch on the idea that, you know, desire and reality may not always be the same thing. And previous attempts haven't gone so well for the BRICS. They've been pretty ambitious in the past. They had a big idea like developing a BRICS credit rating agency and creating a BRICS undersea cable. That didn't materialize. And back in 2014, when the BRICS countries did launch the new development bank, in its founding agreement, it was said that operations may provide financing in the local currency of the country in which the operation takes place. But to date, up until 2023, the bank remains heavily dependent on the dollar for its survival, with local currency financing representing, I believe, about 22% of the bank's portfolio. So the broader point is that they may want to do this, they may think that they can do this, but so far big initiatives haven't materialized. What makes you think that this one could work?
As I said before, I think that the involvement of BRICS has been a deliberate, slow movement, thinking everything through, building up the secretariats. Now I think they are in a position to make the next step upwards. Look who is the new president of the new development bank, the BRICS Bank, the ex-president of Brazil. So you're moving up the scales.
Oh, which ex-president? Certainly not Bolsonaro.
No. What's her name? Rousseff.
So you're saying that the previous grand attempts to do similar big projects that haven't gone well were by design to slowly unveil this, or not necessarily, and shouldn't necessarily, though, be seen as an indication of what they may be able to achieve in the future?
I think probably the previous plans were not well thought out. I think they've learned from those mistakes by building up the secretariats, the think tanks, etc.
And who do you see taking the lead in this? And I know I've asked you this before, but if things are planned out better this time, one would assume that there is a major country doing most of the coordination.
I'm not sure about that. I think it is actually it's being done mutually between all of the countries, and the lead must be the guy sitting at the top of the secretariat. Okay. I don't know who that is, because the advice goes from the secretariat up to the leaders.
Begin your path to financial freedom. Gain up to a $7,000 bonus on us. Register and use promo code. Deposit and enjoy a 7% bonus. Available now. Link in the description.